Cowardice asks, the question, is it safe? Expediency asks, the question, is it politic? Vanity asks, the question, is it popular? But conscience asks, the question, is it right? And there comes a time when one must take a position that is neither safe, nor politic, nor popular, but he must do it because conscience tells him it is right.
Every time our country stands in the path of danger, an instinct seems to summon her finest first, those who truly understand her. When freedom shivers in the cold shadow of true peril, it's always the patriots who first hear the call. When loss of liberty is looming, as it is now, the siren sounds first in the hearts of freedom's vanguard.
Fighting for humanity and against globalism, one mind at a time. It's the Freedom Link with Joe Joseph.
Well, hello, everybody. It is the 5th of November, 2022. Joe Joseph here, along with Scotty Lopez. It is the Freedom Link, and we are live tonight. The broadcast before the threat to democracy. Yes, that is the theme that seems to be going through the mainstream media time and time again, Scotty. Seems to be that talking point, like Department of Defense, Department of War. Now it's threat to democracy. If you don't participate, first of all, whether you vote left or right, it doesn't matter because, we don't live in a two-dimensional world. We live in a three-dimensional world, much more than that, but they've whittled it down to 2 dimensions. And they're basically saying that you must participate. And that if you don't, by democracy itself is under threat.
Right.
And I just wonder, Scotty, because I didn't realize we lived in a democracy, but that's just me. But go ahead.
Right.
Yeah.
And of course, you've been seeing this trend lately. It not just this election, but last election and the election before. It always seems like every election now is the most important election in order to save our democracy.
And
like
funny
enough,
I just want to point this out because this is important. This is important because this isn't the first time that this has been used. Originally, World War I, right? There was a lot of pushback to the United States entering World War I. And it was none other than Edward Bernays himself that started that effort to kind of put Woodrow Wilson on a pedestal, we'll say, and doing it. He used the slogan, making the world safe for democracy. Making the world safe for democracy. That was his exact slogan that they rolled out. And sure enough, that moment came about, Scotty. So here we are again. And they're trying to get people to participate, first of all, to validate that these elections are even, how should we say, credible? But more importantly, they're doing so in a way that weaponizes it, which is exactly what they want.
Right, and it's been weaponized on both sides because now they have everyone believing, or they want everyone to believe that if their side wins, then wow, we've saved a democracy. But if their side loses, then our whole way of life has completely changed. Democracy has been destroyed. We've entered a tyrannical, this new tyrannical regime of the other side now controls the levers of power, and we no longer live in a free country anymore because either the commie tyrannist or the Nazi tyrannist is now in power. So it's quite crazy, and it's just another example of the polarization that has taken place in this country and where we're at now, to where you really can't. It's hard to you can't really choose a side, because you either got to jump on the. I mean,
they want you to
yeah,
choose a side.
they
That's
want you
the
to
thing.
choose.
They
Right,
want you to
right.
choose a side. That's it.
And
And
as
really, the best thing you can do, if you think about it, right? Best thing you could do is just stand back.
right,
Stand
exactly.
back and don't participate, because you have no way or recourse to say no confidence. I don't have confidence in this system. I think everything's corrupt, whether it be Democrat or Republican, left or right. I don't give a crap. It is crap, and I'm putting no contest. They don't want that to be a measure, because if you
Right.
think about it, there's a lot of people that have a crisis of conscience every time they select a candidate or pull a lever or whatever it is, simply by, man, I vote for this person. I am somewhat responsible for the actions
You're
that this
you're
person does while in office, right?
right. You're signing on to everything that comes with that, and so the and like you said earlier, they're using this. Oh, it's a threat to our democracy. Our democracy. Newsflash: we don't live in a democracy in the United States. We live in a constitutional republic. Uh, and in a constitutional republic, the minority still has a say in the situation, whereas a democracy is two wolves and a sheep getting to vote on what's for dinner,
That's
right?
right. That's
So
right.
that's one thing that just completely irks me, is when they keep using this, our democracy is under threat, our democracy. It's like, no, because right there you're already misleading and essentially lying to the public about the our system that we're supposed to live under, which
That's
is a
right.
constitutional republic. So
That's right. So the question is, what are the possibilities for false flags
oh
before the elections? Now, see, that's a
well,
that's a very slippery slope you go down, because of course there's a possibility of it. There's a possibility of many things. Um,
right.
now there are always surprises, but um, I would say that it would be incredibly foolish on anybody's part to do anything like, for example, the follow up comment was Trump indictment for civil unrest. Yeah, you might see that. You might see that with a Trump indictment, or you might see the fact that if Trump gets indicted for any reason, especially in the state of New York, you got a guy like Lee Zeldin, Scotty. We were talking about this before the show, that if that does happen, he can pardon. So if there's anything like that, that's fine. Now if it's of a pardon me, of a federal nature, that might be different. And I don't know. Is it possible? Of course it's possible. I can't
there
say
there's
for
there
one way
are
or another whether or not that's going to happen, but there's spirited people on every side of the argument. You saw it with Black Lives Matters, right?
yep.
There were riots in the streets. There's no reason to expect that there wouldn't be for the opposite side, should their their head or the top personality within that movement getting indicted. I mean, could it happen? Sure, it could happen.
Right. There are cards that both sides could play, depending on what all happens or how things are gonna shake out or look,
Right.
and then you also got the geopolitical stuff that could go down as well, right? I mean, all of
A
a sudden
lot.
we've had this, this talk lately over the past week or two, or the past, I would say 2 or 3 weeks, uh, these discussions about dirty bombs and stuff, and
It's always gonna be a discussion. It's always gonna be
right,
there, right?
right.
Simply
But
because
but
of the ineptitude of these people on both
but the
sides.
fact that it's even being thrown out there, and sort of put into the public consciousness, means that, if something does happen, right, they can be like, oh, and of course, they can always use these events to rally the American public to get everybody to um, fall under the hey, let's support our leader, right? Like a certain event in September of 2001. Even if you were a Democrat or whatever, everybody got behind OGW, right? It united the country, a catalyzing event to unite the country. And it doesn't matter who's in charge. We got to support them, Joe. We got to support them
Gotta
because we
support
got
them.
to
That's
we
right.
got to support them,
Problem,
right?
reaction,
So
solution, man.
so they could use something like that to rein in all of this polarization and
They
get
could
everybody to
very well, but
fall
now
in.
would dirty bomb be a necessarily an effective way of doing that? Let me just ask that. In a realistic point of view, is that something that you would exactly want to do? And then where are you going to do it? And what is like, see, that's a complex type of thing. Not
Right,
to say
right,
that
right.
an event like 9/11 wasn't, because it was, and it was complex, but
And of course
there are
we have to point out
there's
that,
some nuances with that make it very hard to pull off. That's all I'm gonna say.
and we also have to point out the fact that these are the words that were coming from Putin, right? He's the one bringing up all of this dirty bomb talk, saying that Ukraine could possibly utilize a dirty bomb and whatnot. But is that his way of sort of saying, "Hey, watch out for something the West could possibly do," and he's like
Very
getting
well said.
getting
Yeah.
getting out ahead of it and going, hey, they've pulled crap like this before, so I'm going to sound the alarm on something very fishy that could occur.
It
I don't
could,
know.
but
I don't know. But
we're talking about the Russians, right? So
right,
they, if
right, right,
anything,
right,
have
right.
been known for extremely effective clandestine operations, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's
Yep.
not, they know what's going on, and they have the resources and the know-how to figure it out. So I don't see that. I see it as propaganda,
Right,
and I see it
right.
as a boogeyman. I really truly do. I don't think that that's going to happen. If it does,
No, no.
I'd be floored if it did. Only because that is like that's a pariah thing to do. You would be instantly the pariah of the world. And that's a hard thing to say for a country like the United States that has been the only country to use it in warfare, a nuclear weapon, you know? But um,
Right,
when you look at what the cost is of an event like that in a population center, I'm not talking about like in the desert of Death Valley or in a remote region of the Arctic Circle where a lot of the nuclear testing has happened. I'm talking about in a population center. You're talking about years that it becomes uninhabitable.
right,
And I just don't see the appetite. Even the necrotic evil despots and their cronies and the control freaks that run everything, I just don't see the appetite for that. I don't.
Yeah, and right. I personally I don't see Ukraine doing something like that because first of all, they were the epicenter of Chernobyl, so they well know and understand the effects of what a nuclear
There's a
you
history there, right?
yeah disaster
But at
would
the
look
same
like.
time, but at the same time though, Scotty, you can't discount that the corruption that existed
Right,
in
right,
Ukraine prior to Russia's invasion. That had to have been a factor for him to consider it. Period. End of story. There had to have
right,
been some sort of threat.
and you never know what people will do in a desperate situation, and if
Right.
Ukraine feels like they're backed in a corner and Russia starts gaining ground and things start getting really really dicey for them and they feel like a wounded animal trapped in a corner, maybe they play that card. I don't think so, but the fact
I
that
don't
it's
either.
being thrown the fact that it's being thrown around, I think, is just of something to note and sort of
It's a
kind of
boogeyman. It
yeah
really
keep,
truly is. Yep. Now I want to let's see. We got some interesting stuff to get into. And of course, it's the last broadcast before election day. And people that have listened to me over the years know I don't participate. I will not because there is no candidate out there that can represent the core principles I believe need to happen for somebody to get my vote
right.
and hasn't for some time. So
Yeah,
I
there
won't
was
do
there
it.
was only one candidate that I would have actually went out and voted for, and that was Ron Paul.
Ron Paul. Yeah, that was it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
And those days are gone. So
Right.
with that said, because they don't put no confidence, I can't do it. Right. So there are some things going on in the news that are of interest and should be of interest to you. And that's what we're going to go through in the next hour is to kind of give a recap of some of the important things that I think you should be following because that is where I kind of figure the action's going to be and going to end up being. And it's typically not where you would think. That's the other thing. We can look at economy and say that yeah, is there a lot of risk with the economy? Of course there is. There's always risk with the economy. Now more than ever, you have geopolitics. That's crazy. You have an economic war that's going on beneath everything. There's layers of action going on behind the scenes, and you're only you're given snippets of what's actually going on. So we'll try to kind of dive into that a little bit. The first thing of note that I think we should get into is the Federal Reserve. And it's something that we've harped on for a very long time that the banksters run everything, that we know that, and that it is a entity of such unbelievable power that you cannot discount it, not for a second, right? So, Activist Post has a, great piece. Famous last words from the Fed. We will stay the course until the job is done. What does that
Oh,
mean?
that
What does
means
that mean to you,
interest
Scotty?
rates. I'm saying that they're going to keep raising those interest rates. They're going to keep.
Is that a bad thing? Let me ask you something. Is that a bad thing?
I mean I don't see what they can really do though. Honestly, to
They're
stop
not looking
the.
at it that way. They're not looking at it that way. But let me ask you this. Typically, in the past, take the last 100 years, it's always been common practice that you would make a wage, you come home, you take care of your expenses, and then you salted away. A minority of people, after the Great Depression, there was a big scare that happened that scared a lot of people away from the stock market post Great Depression. There's a trepidation there. So you only had a limited group, let's just say, of the global population that played that game. But then 401ks came around, right? Because there was an understanding that as time went on, you couldn't rely on savings or Social Security to ensure that you were going to be taken care of into your later years simply because the dollar was losing value and people were losing purchasing power. This is all a result of the Fed. And people like Charles Lindbergh Sr., uh, Senators McCormick and Dickstein were influential in trying to bring about hearings within the government to expose the money trust and their control on our lives and the erosion of not only the American dream, but just of the standard of living.
Right.
But that was kind of muted in a way by the onset of the American Industrial Revolution, then World War One and World War Two, and the technology that came about that made people's lives easier, more efficient. Work was more efficient, getting to work was more efficient. Everybody's lives, every avenue of their lives became more efficient. So the effect of that was blunted or muted to an extent through these efficiencies. And we saw those efficiencies and realized them through the 1980s into the early 1990s when they figured out, oh man, we got to do something about this because we've run out of gas with these efficiencies. We can't possibly squeeze any more out to do this. So we need to find some other lever to pull to be able to keep that or kick that can down the road per se. And so they went about NAFTA, CAFTA, and the idea of free trade agreements. Free trade agreements really did help extend that period of basically the American dream, if you will, but it came at a sacrifice. And that sacrifice was savings because people no longer save because they didn't get paid enough to save anything. And then there was interest rates. Interest rates collapsed around the late 90s, early 2000s, and onwards to now because cheap money was required in order to keep the economy afloat. Now, the idea and the concept was that, hey, we can do this ad nauseum. Why? Because every other country in the world's printing money. So if they can do it, we can do it. The problem is the underlying economics or the underlying fundamentals are the same no matter where you go, no matter what country. And there are ratios that are pretty much you don't mess with because it's like math. You don't defy physics. You know, there's things of that nature that are pretty much set in stone. And when we hit $30 trillion in debt, in and around there, whatever that tipping point was, that was it. Poop, scales tipped. Next thing you know, inflation starts to go crazy. So there are a lot of things that are not just at play here with the election, but even so post-election, because the election's just
Right.
but a minor facet of it all, Scotty. The other thing is, right? So here's a couple of things. In the United States, we got something called a debt ceiling. And that debt ceiling has or will be reached in a very short period of time. And I think with extraordinary measures, they can operate the government through about January or so. You have $31 trillion in debt. You have um, inflation running at what the real inflation rate, only you know. When you go to the store and you measure the price increases that are happening in real time as you're doing it, and you can see it, right? If you go buy a dozen eggs, it should blow your mind what you're paying for a dozen eggs, right?
Right.
I think so. Um, Groceries across the board, everything you're paying for. Look at how much it costs for paper plates, right? Paper plates. This
Yeah.
is stuff that's recycled material, and it costs you an astronomical sum. I would say almost double what it cost you 6 months ago. What is that all about? Right? Where is this coming from? Where are these shortages coming from? Why all of a sudden are we out of diesel fuel? These are things that we have to be asking ourselves. But do you think an election's going to solve it? No. If
I
anything,
Yep.
it's just a point in time, Scotty. That's all it
Right.
is.
And
It's a historical
I was gonna
marker.
say, this is another example of it doesn't matter which side you vote for. Left or right, whatever. The Fed is going to do what the Fed is going to do because
That's right.
the Fed doesn't answer to anybody on the left or the right. Uh, and the Fed is the one that is able to pull the levers and steer which way the economy is going to go, and make
That's
these
right.
decisions. And so,
So
you
here
know,
we are, right? The Fed, they're going to stay the course. And
yep,
Michael Snyder, economiccollapseblog.com, he writes the last time interest rates were so high, this high, the U.S. economy had plunged into the Great Recession and millions of Americans lost their jobs. But the Federal Reserve isn't going to stop here. Of course they're not. In fact, Jerome Powell, the Fed chairman, is telling us that more rate increases are on the way. Now, for those that are saving, that's a great thing. That's not bad, right? Because
right,
typically in the past, what you would be doing is you would be saving. And when this stuff comes around and you start having higher
right.
interest rates, you end up
The
making more
interest on your
money,
Yeah, the interest on your
right?
savings goes up, and so that's a good thing for people that are saving, right? You
That's
know.
absolutely right. So that's not necessarily a
Hmm.
bad thing, but now it is because people are so indebted,
Hmm.
right? Now, once
Right,
it's a measure of debt and what you're paying as far as interest, of course, it's terrible. The problem is
right,
the world is underwater. It's saturated with debt. And as Michael Snyder says, you know, and I'm going to point it out right here. But this isn't the early 1980s. It's not the early 1980s at all because we don't have the same factors at play that we did in the early 1980s. The debt has exploded since then, right?
right.
So that the whole Volcker rule and all that stuff that you hear doesn't play. It's not applicable because the game has changed. The game has changed 100%. So you can't even for a second say that, well, we just got to raise interest until this goes and it'll tamp it down. No, it won't. There's another thing that's going on at the same time. You see, because from 9/11 or so onward to present day, the Fed has printed about $9.5 trillion. They've monetized about 9.5 to $10 trillion of our debt. Now, what does that mean? That means that there wasn't an appetite for our debt at a certain interest rate. They couldn't get people or countries or corporations or entities to purchase our debt for all the social programs, for the military buildups, for whatever it is, the pandemic, whatever you want to call it. All of those years, crisis after crisis, things were monetized or debt was monetized to help fend off these crises. And the Fed's sitting on about, I'd say, about $10 trillion of it. Now, not only are they not buying that debt anymore, that quantitative easing, that term that you've heard, which is nothing more than printing money,
Right.
but they're having to trickle it back in. All of that monetized debt. Now, all of a sudden, they have to let it mature and they're not going to roll it over. So there is a serious liquidity crisis going on top of everything else. So if nobody's going to purchase the debt at a low interest rate, that means that as our $31 trillion in debt matures, each time it matures, they're having to roll it over at a much higher interest rate, which in turn is going to cost the American people a fortune. And this is where austerity comes in, because it is an ugly term that we've seen used in other countries that's caused riots, the Arab Spring. Um, it has happened everywhere where debt becomes and inflation becomes a problem. And once you have inflation and it takes hold, it's very, very, very hard to stop it. It's almost like a death spiral.
Right.
And
I was gonna say
you have
it's
to
like a
be
snowball. Once it starts picking up, and it just gets bigger and bigger and bigger and more out of control, and yeah, it's very hard to
very hard
come
to
back
stop
from
it,
that.
right? And
Yeah, right.
you have to take some pretty tough steps, especially when you have a country like ours that has been addicted to handouts since about the 1960s, right? Because
Right.
it happened with FDR in its infancy, but at that time, FDR used it as a way to rescue the country from a very, very deep depression, which the Great Recession was nothing more than a depression. Let's just call it what it was. And he took those measures, putting it into infrastructure and other things to help build the economy back up, put people to work. It was, in everybody's guesstimation, a pretty needed thing, but it helped modernize the country and its infrastructure. Not necessarily a bad thing, right? But today, that's not happening. And even if you tried to do it, you couldn't do it by going into debt. Now, every president before Biden had that ability to do so. From Biden on, that's not going to happen without some sort of budgetary realignment or significant tax increases. Now, in the 1950s, late 1940s, 1950s, the top tier tax bracket was 90%. Think about that, 90%. Many of us, matter of fact, I would wager to say most of us that are tuning in tonight wouldn't qualify for the 90% tax bracket, but most of Hollywood did.
No.
People of
Yeah.
means certainly did. But if you think about that, that's kind of that's steep. And but you still had a generation that was used to rationing and making sacrifices.
Right.
And
They
and
had that
we're in
mentality of,
that mindset,
well, if it's for the good of the country,
the
then I'm
greater
willing to
good,
take
right?
one. Yeah, if I'm willing to take one for the team. If it's going to help the greater good,
Because
kind of
that's
thing. Right.
because that was easier, that was a message, and propaganda was much more easier to get out, and when it was much
Right.
more easier to control people back then. Now it's not, right? Because the internet, you now have many different avenues to communicate, and because of that, humans naturally will try to sort things out the best way they can. Some of them have a sense of justice, some of them, quite frankly, don't. But those that do have an avenue to get it out, right? And that is what has caused this great awakening. Whether you like it or not, people have achieved a myriad of viewpoints because information is now more accessible than it ever has been before.
Right.
So that brings us back to now, right? So present day, we are in a situation not like FDR, not like Lyndon Johnson, not like Clinton after uh, the recession post um, Iraq War One. You have a very unique situation, something that the world has never really dealt with, and that is everybody is just drowning in debt, and um, they have no other way out but to cut or print more money, right? That seems to be the way everybody thinks. Now, I don't think that that's going to be a viable solution because any way you cut it, with as much of a tinderbox as many societies are in the Western world, you're going to have large scale civil unrest.
Right.
You just can't avoid it. You just can't because people are already stressed out. They're already stretched beyond their means. There were lines, I want to say 2 days long, 3 days long in Poland for coal to heat their house, right? People are camping out on the road for coal. This is stuff that, like, 20 years ago, go get coal. What's the deal? Not a problem. Now with all this uh, uh, baloney carbon crap, ESG,
Right.
um, all of this stuff, it's crazy. We'll get into ESG a little bit more too, but I mean, it, it's insane, and
And then
we're
on
causing
top of
these
that,
mass shortages.
right.
We're shooting ourselves in the foot, Scotty.
And to your point, about the whole debt situation, right? How many people do you think throughout the pandemic have had to go into debt? You know, uh, because of lockdowns and because of the fact that they couldn't work and whatnot, and they're just like, hey, I gotta still provide. I still gotta do something. So what? Just charge to the card. This is the only way we can sustain ourselves during all of this. So that compounds the issue as well. And you know, it would. I wonder. I wonder what the stats are. Like, how much of the population is like in debt as to how much of the population actually has like a nest egg and savings that they can fall back on. I guarantee it. Probably the majority of the population is under some kind of debt. So, um, to your point about the Fed raising interest rates, it may help those people that have savings, but if the mass majority of the population is in debt,
That's right.
then that's going
Yeah.
to create a huge problem. So
Well, that's the case, right? I think they said something
right
along the lines of um, anywhere from 50% to 2/3 are paycheck to paycheck.
there
Now
you go.
that's
See,
that's that's
and
pretty staggering. That's pretty staggering because
right.
if you or your loved ones go out and about or do their thing or interface with your friends or relatives, you don't get that. You don't get that feeling, right? You don't get that. I don't get that. We'll put it that way with the people I interface with. However, I will say that the reality of the situation is much, much more critical than I would say people are letting on to believe. And you can tell by other ways, right? The
Right.
stress level of people is just through the roof. Um, you can see it by the amount of crime that's happening, especially in your population centers. It's exploding. And that's not just a direct fact of, zero cash bail or anything like that. No, that is, does that help? Of course, it doesn't help, but it is not an indicator of why the crime is happening in the first place. And the reason why
And
the
there's a lot
crime
of
is
people
happening in
out
the
there.
first place is because people are struggling. That's why.
Right. And there's a lot of people out there, you would just look at them on the outside and you're like, oh, they look like they're doing just fine. And a lot of these people have had to go into debt in order to maintain that quality of life that they're used to, right? In order to
Absolutely.
maintain all that. So um yeah, even people that you wouldn't think would be in debt or be struggling, they actually are. So um yeah, it's definitely, like you said, it's a
Yep.
totally different ball game right now than what we were dealing with in the early 80s.
Absolutely. And that's why you can't compare the two. That's why it's foolish to
Right.
try and compare the two. That's why when people make uh, references to Volcker And what he did what he had to do in the spur of the moment based on the, you know, the metrics that he had to deal with. But the fact is that we don't live in that time and things are different. And you can hear many people saying the same thing time after time, which is this ain't 1980s. And we're not in the same area. So I want to keep on. This article has a lot of good stuff in it, and it again
Okay.
it helps you realize the gravity of the situation we're in more so,
Right.
but that the fact that no matter who you vote for, it's not going to matter anyway because the genie's out of the bottle, for lack of a better term. Now, it says dramatically hiking the interest rates at the beginning of a major economic downturn is literally suicidal. Absolutely. It runs counterproductive to what you'd want to do in a downturn. In a downturn, you want to lower the interest rates and you want to make things as liquid as humanly possible. In an industrial or a production standpoint, right? You're looking at when things slow down, you want to capitalize on that time by doing things with capital projects. And when I say capital projects, I mean things that where you're buying equipment with debt and amortizing that over 10 years, 15 years, right? And this is typically where companies will go and advance technology. You know, though they may buy an autonomous bottle wrapper, right, or something like that. Yeah, just giving
Right.
you an example. But there's many ways. A five-axis grinder, you know, who knows what it is, but typically that's when companies take that time to retool and to reimagine the way that they're doing things, so that when the economy picks back up, they're ready and they can respond. Now the
Right.
problem is that that's not able to happen this time. See, there's an issue with um, this downturn, because this downturn you're not seeing that. The Fed isn't going and saying, "Okay, guys, this downturn we're going to lower interest rates. We're going to really invigorate things." Why? Because things got too hot too fast, and they didn't respond to it. All that money printing during the pandemic caused a lot of problems. That was an excuse. That's the other thing you have to understand, is that the things that they're telling you is not the reason why things are collapsing. It wasn't the pandemic. It wasn't printing all the money, although yes, it was printing all the money, but $31 trillion, right?
Things were
They
already
were
heading in that
already in
direction.
motion.
Right.
They needed a
Right.
scapegoat. They needed a
Hmm.
scapegoat, and they got one. They got one with the pandemic. The pandemic, by the way, that you could argue was engineered, perhaps, much like many of these economic events that we see are often engineered, much like
Right.
many of these events that happen, um, wars, um, these singular events that happen to, two buildings
Coinc-
falling into the
yeah,
same footprint, that
right.
kind of thing, defying the laws of physics. Those are engineered, right? So there
Right.
tends to be an engineered factor to it, and they tend to need a scapegoat, one that covers the tracks of the, um, let's just say, dubious behavior that's been going on for a while. So that's where we're at. We're at that point. However, what's the solution? Well, the World Economic Forum has already told us what the solution is, my friends. And it's the same solution that they've been looking for since 1774, which is a one world currency, a one world government. Let's everybody sing kumbaya together, and we're going to get along and we're going to love each other, and everything's going to be okay. Oh, by the way though, 95% of you, yeah, yeah, you're not going to make it because the Earth's overpopulated, you see, and it's not going to make it with you. So there's going to have to be something. Now, we don't know what that is. We can't tell you, but there's going to be something where 80 to 95% of the world's population. Now, what could that be?
Eh, who knows?
Now,
Who
I will
knows?
say this.
And
I will say this. In all honesty, every time something has happened, and you and I have been doing this for a long time, every time it's happened, it's been something that we totally weren't looking for. Every
right,
single freaking
right.
time, right? So
It-
if they say Putin, right? Don't look there. That's the squirrel. Look, a squirrel, right? That's Putin. Putin's a squirrel. What is going on and where's it going to come from? That's going to be the question, you know? And by the way, don't think North Korea either. I mean, funny, ha ha ha, but not going to happen. Nor China. China has too much to lose, you know? Now,
right.
is
It
it
could be something completely out of left field, like Venezuela or something like that. I
something, right?
mean, yeah,
Or
or
yeah, it's just don't even try to guess or argue. There's no
yeah, or
purpose in it. It does you no good.
natural disaster. Any there's a whole wide
The
array
only thing
of
you can
things.
do, the only thing you can do is just if you don't have faith and you don't think that you're taken care of in that regard, right? Then prepare. But what are you preparing for? That's the next question, right? Oh, I can prepare for societal collapse. Well, that's all well and good until, like Joe Fox says uh, in the chat room, well, I can only pray for an asteroid. Well, then the asteroid shows up, right? So,
Right.
how are you going to prepare for an asteroid? You're really not going to prepare for an asteroid. How are you going to prepare for a pole flip? Well, you're not going to really prepare for a full pole flip. It's just a pole flip. You just do. You just hope and pray that, hey, look, I'm here. Because what do you trust? Do you trust a map that some conspiracy theorist came up with in the 1970s to say, oh, you're going to be safe here in the Ozarks? Yeah, a lot of people took that to heart, and they built their bunkers and their hideaways and their getaways up in the Ozarks. But there's no way of knowing. You don't know. You'll never know. You'll never know, right? So, what do you do? What do you do? You live each day. Let me just say this, and I think it's the most important thing. If there's anything you ever learned from this broadcast with Scotty and I'm going to tell you straight up: live each day to the fullest. Like you're
Yes.
not going to get tomorrow every day because you never know what tomorrow's going to bring. And um, at this point, who the hell knows? There's so many things in play. There's convergences that are happening that nobody have seen before. We're in
Right.
uncharted territory,
Yeah, so
right?
many crazy things have happened that like I would have had no clue, it was totally not on my bingo card, right? And that's the crazy thing is
Yeah. Who knew that this country would ever? I thought after Woodrow Wilson had a stroke in the White House and Edith Galt ran the presidency for about 2.5 years, you know, I never thought we would see a knowingly senile person be elected to the highest office in the land. It just goes to show you
right.
that if there is one example that one person does not control, one person, it is the control freaks behind the scene that do that. What a stunning example that
That the quote
of that,
unquote
right?
yeah, that the quote unquote leader of the free world would be so compromised and um uh just inept and unable to do anything
And that's the other thing. Look at
was
Bim Jim.
right.
Look at Bim Jim here. Be a grown up. That's right. Do a little
Right.
package check, men. Right? Package check. Oh, we still got cojones.
Hmm.
All right. It's a good
Right.
day, right? It's a good day. So that's it, man. Be thankful for what you have, because it can always be worse. Rest assured. Believe me, it could always be worse. There's very few scenarios where it can't be. They exist, but oftentimes it can be worse. So thank
Right.
you for everything that you got, because it can always be worse. And thank you for today. Like today was a hey, sunny Massachusetts, 75 degrees. It's November 5th. Hey, it was a great day. Wonderful day.
Hey,
You know, thank
remember,
you for that.
remember, remember remember the 5th of November.
Oh man, not that. Oh, oh God. I forgot all about that. I couldn't even what you said. I was like,
Yeah.
no. So yeah, that's huge. But think about
Yeah.
that. And honestly, folks, recalibrate like that and make the most out of each day. Make the most out of each day, because nothing really, what are you going to do? There's only so many places you can go in the mountains before the mountains get crowded. And then you're going to run into the same issue in the mountains, right? So you have to understand that it's a very dynamic, it's a very fluid situation, and things can change on a dime. You can have everything in the world and then die of a heart attack the next day. You don't know. Now more than ever, right? Now, Joe, you're crazy. I mean, come on. This is the United States. It's a first world country. That doesn't happen anymore. Look, people can't afford health coverage, health care anymore. We're seeing a plummeting life expectancy. You're seeing more people die um, just for common ailments or um, just instantly. Why is that happening? What
Well,
what could be going on? Many things that have changed in the last few years that people haven't been told, the truth on, perhaps. But certainly, things have happened to where times are a changing, and the fact that you might live tomorrow isn't set in stone anymore. So
I
just
wonder how many. I wonder how many people back in the day were like, "Hey, we're the Roman Empire. We've been around for 1,000 years. Nothing's gonna happen to us." You know what I mean? We're the biggest empire in the world.
oh,
It's
complacency's a
impossible for us.
bitch. You
Right.
could
Right.
well, you could make that similar argument with the whole human race,
Right.
right?
Right. Right.
Because if you
Yeah.
think about it, people have been sold a bill of goods, and that bill of goods is, well, things have been great here on planet Earth for millions of years, and things like that, and blah blah blah. No, you don't understand. It is a very short period of time where we have had stability like this. If you think the current iteration of humanity is about 5 to 6,000 years old, or so, right? Let's just say 5 to 10. Let's just take it a step
Okay.
further. Let's just say five to ten
Okay.
thousand years old, right? Still,
Right.
10,000 years old compared to millions of years, that is a huge
Right.
disparity that you're talking about, right?
Right. It's
A
it's it,
blink of
it's
the
a
eye.
yeah a minuscule microscopic notch in the grand scheme of the history of this planet. So
Very, very, very much so. And there have
right.
been different iterations of mankind. There have been societies that have come and gone that have been washed away in the blink of an eye. And the same thing's going to happen again. And it's going to happen again very soon. And when that happens, there's no amount of generators, no amount of canned goods or freeze dried food or anything else that's going to save you. It is just going to be faith. That's the only thing that's going to save you at that point, because what else do you got? Nothing. So
Right.
that's the things to focus on and hold on to, which is thank you for today. I got through it. I hope tomorrow's a new day and that everything's good. And if you can get through that day and get into the next, you're ahead of the game as far as I'm concerned in these days, because anything from any direction at this point is a threat. And we've exposed ourselves. We've made ourselves vulnerable by letting these control freaks run the show for so long. There's nothing more we can do. I think that they've
Right.
looted us to the point where there's nothing left. And now they're just going to let it correct itself. And that's going to mean, I think, a lot of people are going to not be so happy. We'll just put
Right.
it that way in a very, very, very generic sense.
And by correct itself, you mean a reset of some kind?
Perhaps a great reset?
A great reset of some sort? Oh.
Because the World Economic Forum hasn't said that enough ad nauseum. So when the control freaks tell you what they're going to do, you tend to listen, right? Because that's what they're going to do. Now, next hour, we're going to talk about Twitter. We're going to talk about Joy Reid, and we'll talk about some stillbirths that are happening.
Oh.
An egregious increase of stillbirths. Why are those happening? All when we get back. So don't go away. Much more to come here on the Freedom Link, kgradb.com. We'll be right back.
Hey members, the new KGRA DB app is now available on iOS and Android devices. Gain on-demand access to any KGRA DB programming. Download any show directly to your mobile device to listen or watch on the go. Go to the App Store and search KGRA DB.
Are you looking to go on a faraway journey that is magical and mysterious, reaping on mystical legends? If so, then Mysterious Adventure Tours is perfect for you. Imagine a voyage to explore ancient mysteries of Ireland, haunted majesties of Scotland, or their chilling birth of the vampires in Romania. These small esoteric getaways are limited and do fill fast. So, go to MysteriousAdventureTours.com and book your trip soon.
It's not just a donation.
It's a warm blanket.
It's a bottle of clean water.
It's a roof and a bed.
It's knowing someone cares.
It's feeling safe.
It's a today that's better than yesterday.
Every dollar you can spare helps so much more than you can imagine. Please, donate now to help people affected by Hurricane Ian. Your support is urgently needed.
You're listening to the KGRA Digital Broadcasting Network. We provide unparalleled coverage of trending news in the world of ufology, cryptozoology, and paranormal phenomenon. Whether you're watching our video live stream or listening to one of our audio programs, you are getting the best from world-renowned researchers and hosts, guiding you through topics the mainstream won't touch. Miss one of your favorite programs? No problem. Head over to the members area at kgradb.com for access to our massive library of award-winning content. Make contact, stay connected, only at kgradb.com.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Freedom Link right here on kgradb.com. And waiting for Joe to get back. He's having a little bit of connection issues, but we will get back into some of the topics here that we were talking about. And yeah, let's talk about Twitter and Elon's. Elon has made quite a splash and has ruffled quite a bit of feathers ever since he took control of the. What do you think about all of this, Joe?
I think it's great. I think it's wonderful. I think that it's something that needed to be done. I don't think there are anybody of means or any sort of crowdfunding campaign that could have pulled it off, like an Elon could have. I think that Elon is genuine in his mindset and his ability to be able to pull this off. If anybody could, I believe that anybody in this situation would have their hands full, no matter what it is or how you go about it. Managing a public square in this fashion is a difficult task in this day and age because of the wussification, if you will, of society, because people don't understand the ancient adage of sticks and stones may break my bones, but names will never hurt me. So things that are said on a tweet shouldn't necessarily ruffle the feathers as much as sometimes they do. And the other thing that I think is very, very a very influential part of this is the lawyer lobby. If you think about the lawyer lobby, right? Lawsuits, tort, all of that stuff has exploded in the 20th century and 21st century.
Right.
People will sue for any reason whatsoever. And what better way or what easier way for a lawyer to make money than somebody, oh, I was defamed. Oh, punitive damages. That kind of thing. I can't stand it. Ever since the lady took the coffee from the McDonald's drive-through that says caution hot and spilled it in her lap and sued McDonald's because she got burnt by hot coffee and won, that's a problem. I think ever since then it was like, whoa, whatever happened to personal responsibility?
Frivolous lawsuits have gotten completely out of
Exploded,
control, and
right?
So
any sort of thing, right, that goes hand in hand with some sort of social media policy, some sort of and it's not just Twitter. Let's just be clear, it's all of them. There has to be some sort of tort reform or some sort of limitation. You got to knock the lawyers back because it's just out of control. You have to respect the freedom of speech. You have to respect, and unless somebody's civil liberties are threatened, truly threatened, then there should be absolutely nothing that happens to anybody or speech limited or anything else, even if it hurts you, even if you find it offensive, even if it might, ruffle your feathers a little bit. Get over it. Get over it. But people should be able to speak their mind. And by the way, we should be able to communicate with each other in a civilized fashion. And if we can't, then we really have to, Scotty, we have to look at what's got us here. Why is the vitriol so nasty and toxic? And what can we do to tamp it down a bit? What can we do to bring people together in a way where we respect each other? Because that has a lot to do with things. Respect. but and not want to like rip each other's throats out. What do we got to
Right.
do?
I don't know, man. It's the the point that we've reached is it's surreal. Honestly,
Very
it's
much
it's
so.
a very
Very much so.
you know, the things that people get upset about, and it's and how much. And here's another thing: like, how much of it do you think is genuine? Like them being genuinely
How would you
upset,
know?
or just right, or are they just using it as an excuse to just shut people down that they don't like, right?
Yeah.
And you know, it's. I think a lot of this has to do with what Yuri Bezmenov, or not Yuri, yeah, was it Yuri Bezmenov that G. Edward Griffin interviewed, right? He was ex KGB, you know, he was ex KGB for the Soviet Union, defected to the United States, and was explaining, you know, in his interview with G. Edward Griffin of, hey, you know, this is how they're infiltrating your education system. This is how they're infiltrating your colleges. This is how they're demoralizing your society. It starts with the youth. It's going to take 2 to 3 generations for it to fully take hold, and you're, you know, for you to see the fruits of this. And I think that that's a lot of what we're seeing, is the fact that there's been this this effort to mold and reshape the way the youth think in this country. And this is part of all of the social justice, you know, the SJW sort of woke mentality, where words now have, you know, the policing of speech, the words now have completely different definitions than what they used to have. And it's all part of this. And I see you've got it pulled up there. So, I mean, if you want to play a little bit of that, I think it's very important, because
I don't know if I can play it over the I don't know if I'm set up for that, but
if you want to send it to me, I can
do that, because I think it's important that people understand and hear what he has to say, because it's pretty relevant. The things that and mind you, by the way, there is no it's not a Russians are doing this, the United States are doing this. This transcends borders, nationalities. It transcends all of that. I sent it to you in the private chat there, Scotty.
Okay. And you got to remember that the playbook that Yuri Bezmenov is talking about, you know, he's framing it in the context of what the Soviet Union does. But you got to remember, the Soviet Union and Marxism is all based off of, you know, that little character we like to talk about back in 1776 named
Adam Weishaupt.
Oh my God! Adam Weishaupt,
and Mr. Rothschild himself. You know.
Right. So, you know, the planks of the Communist Manifesto just very conveniently align with the planks and all of that of Adam
New World Order, right?
With the plans of the New World Order. So, you know, it's easy to just point and go, oh, those pesky Ruskies, those dirty commies. But this is something that is
all propaganda.
It transcends that, and it's something that's beyond that. So I'm gonna see if I can pull this up here and play it. But it's very, very, very interesting. No doubt. Give me a second.
You spoke
here.
several
Okay,
times
here we go.
before about ideological subversion. That is a phrase that I'm afraid some Americans don't fully understand. When the Soviets use the phrase ideological subversion, what do they mean by it?
Ideological subversion is the process which is legitimate, overt, and open. You can see it with your own eyes. All you have to do, all American mass media has to do, is to unplug their bananas from their ears, open up their eyes, and they can see it. There is no mystery. There is nothing to do with espionage. I know that espionage intelligence gathering looks more romantic. It sells more deodorants through the advertising, probably. That's why your Hollywood producers are so crazy about James Bond type of thrillers. But in reality, the main emphasis of the KGB is not in the area of intelligence at all. According to my opinion and opinion of many defectors of my caliber, only about 15% of time, money, and manpower is spent on espionage as such. The other 85% is a slow process which we call either ideological subversion or active measures, активные мероприятия in the language of the KGB, or psychological warfare. What it basically means is to change the perception of reality of every American to such an extent that despite of the abundance of information, no one is able to come to sensible conclusions in the interests of defending themselves, their families, their community, and their country. It's a great brainwashing process which goes very slow, and it's divided in 4 basic stages. The first one being demoralization. It takes from 15 to 20 years to demoralize a nation. Why that many years? Because this is the minimum number of years which requires to educate one generation of students in the country of your enemy, exposed to the ideology of the enemy. In other words, Marxism-Leninism ideology is being pumped into the soft heads of at least 3 generations of American students without being challenged or counterbalanced by the basic values of Americanism, American patriotism. The result you can see. Most of the people who graduated in the 60s, dropouts or half-baked intellectuals, are now occupying the positions of power in the government, civil service, business, mass media, educational system. You are stuck with them. You cannot get rid of them. They are contaminated. They are programmed to think and react to certain stimuli in a certain pattern. You cannot change their mind, even if you expose them to authentic information, even if you prove that white is white and black is black. You still cannot change the basic perception and the logic of behavior. In other words, these people, the process of demoralization is complete and irreversible. To get rid society of these people, you need another 20 or 15 years to educate a new generation of patriotically minded and common sense people who would be acting in favor and in the interests of the United States society.
And yet these people who've been programmed and, as you say, in place and who are favorable to an opening with the Soviet concept, these are the very people who would be marked for extermination in this country?
Most of them, yes. Simply because the psychological shock when they will see in future what the beautiful society of equality and social justice means in practice, obviously they will revolt. They will be very unhappy, frustrated people. And the Marxist-Leninist regime does not tolerate these people. Obviously they will join the links of dissenters, dissidents. Unlike in present United States, there will be no place for dissent in future Marxist-Leninist America. Here you can get popular like Daniel Ellsberg and filthy rich like Jane Fonda for being dissident, for criticizing your Pentagon. In future, these people will be simply squashed like cockroaches. Nobody is going to pay them nothing for their beautiful, noble ideas of equality. This they don't understand, and it will be greatest shock for them, of course. The demoralization process in the United States is basically completed already. For the last 25 years. Actually, it's overfulfilled because demoralization now reaches such areas where previously not even Comrade Andropov and all his experts would even dream of such a tremendous success. Most of it is done by Americans to Americans, thanks to lack of moral standards. As I mentioned before, exposure to true information does not matter anymore. A person who was demoralized is unable to assess true information. The facts tell nothing to him. Even if I shower him with information, with authentic proof, with documents, with pictures, even if I take him by force to the Soviet Union and show him concentration camp, he will refuse to believe it until he is going to receive a kick in his fat bottom. When a military boot crashes his, then he will understand, but not before that. That's the tragic of the situation of demoralization. So basically America is stuck with demoralization, and unless, even if you start right now, here, this minute, you start educating new generation of Americans, it will still take you 15 to 20 years to turn the tide of ideological perception of reality back to normalcy and patriotism. The next stage is destabilization. This time, subverter does not care about your ideas and the patterns of your consumption. Whether you eat junk food and get fat and flabby, it doesn't matter anymore. This time, and it takes only from 2 to 5 years to destabilize a nation, what matters is essentials: economy, foreign relations, defense systems. And you can see it quite clearly that in some areas, in such sensitive areas as defense and economy, the influence of Marxist-Leninist ideas in the United States is absolutely fantastic. I could never believe it 14 years ago when I landed in this part of the world that the process will go that fast. The next stage, of course, is crisis. It may take only up to 6 weeks to bring a country to the verge of crisis. You can see it in Central America now. And after crisis, with a violent change of power, structure, and economy, you have so-called the period of normalization. It may last indefinitely. Normalization is a cynical expression borrowed from Soviet propaganda. When the Soviet tanks moved into Czechoslovakia in '68, Comrade Brezhnev said, "Now the situation in brotherly Czechoslovakia is normalized." This is what will happen in the United States if you allow all these schmucks to bring the country to crisis, to promise people all kind of goodies and the paradise on earth, to destabilize your economy, to eliminate the principle of free market competition, and to put a big brother government in Washington, D.C., with benevolent dictators like Walter Mondale, who will promise lots of things, never mind whether the promises are fulfillable or not. He will go to Moscow to kiss the bottoms of new generation of Soviet assassins. Never mind. He will create false illusions that the situation is under control. Situation is not under control. Situation is disgustingly out of control. Most of the American politicians, media, and educational system trains another generation of people who think they are living at a peacetime. False. United States is in the state of war, undeclared total war against the basic principles and the foundations of this system. And the initiator of this war is not Comrade Andropov, of course. It's the system. However ridiculous it may sound, the world communist system or the world communist conspiracy, whether I scare some people or not, I don't give a hoot. If you are not scared by now, nothing can scare you. But you don't have to be paranoid about it. What actually happens now, that unlike myself, you have literally several years to live on unless the United States wake up. The time bomb is ticking. With every second, the disaster is coming closer and closer. Unlike myself, you will have nowhere to defect to, unless you want to live in Antarctica with penguins. This is it. This is the last country of freedom and possibility.
Okay, so what do we do? What is your recommendation to the American people?
Well, the immediate thing that comes to my mind is, of course, there must be a very strong national effort to educate people in the spirit of real patriotism, number one. Number two, to explain them the real danger of socialist, communist, whatever, welfare state, big brother government. If people will fail to grasp the impending danger of that development. Nothing ever can help United States. You may kiss goodbye to your freedom, including freedoms to homosexuals, to prison inmate. All this freedom will vanish, evaporate in 5 seconds, including your precious lives. The second thing, the moment at least part of United States population is convinced that the danger is real, they have to force their government. And I'm not talking about sending letters, signing petitions, and all this beautiful, noble activity. I'm talking about forcing United States government to stop aiding communism. Because there is no other problem more burning and urgent than to stop the Soviet military-industrial complex from destroying whatever is left of the free world. And it is very easy to do. No credits, no technology, no money, no political or diplomatic recognition, and of course no such idiocy as grain deals to USSR. The Soviet people, 270 millions of Soviets, will be eternally thankful to you if you stop aiding a bunch of murderers who sit now in Kremlin and whom President Reagan respectfully calls government. They do not govern anything, least of all such complexity as the Soviet economy. So basic, two very simple, maybe too simplistic answers or solutions, but nevertheless they are the only solutions. Educate yourself, understand what's going on around you. You are not living at the time of peace. You are in a state of war, and you have precious little time to save yourself. You don't have much time, especially if you are talking about young generation. There's not much time left for convulsions to the beautiful disco music. Very soon it will go, just overnight. If we are talking about capitalists or wealthy businessmen, I think they are selling the rope on which they will hang very soon. If they don't stop, if they cannot curb their unsettled desire for profit, and if they keep on trading with the monster of the Soviet communism, they are going to hang very soon. And they will pray to be killed, but unfortunately they will be sent to Alaska probably to manage industry of slaves. It's simplistic. I know it sounds unpleasant. I know Americans don't like to listen to things which are unpleasant. But I have defected not to tell you the stories about such idiocy as microfilm, James Bond type espionage. This is garbage. You don't need any espionage anymore. I have come to talk about survival. It's a question of survival of this system. You may ask me, what is it in for me? Survival, obviously, because unlike, as I said, I am now in your boat. If we sing together, we'll sing beautifully together. There is no other place on this planet to defect to.
And funny enough, or not funny enough, Scotty, and thanks guys, because I hope you know that was 13 minutes of just holy moly, like crush your head in. That was 1980s, early 1980s that J. Griffin did that. Think about that now in context of what we're going through today. Think about what he said.
Right.
We've lived it.
Right. The more. Oops. Hold on.
I heard.
All right. Am I coming through? Oh, okay. I thought my stuff was muted. The more I listen to that, because I've heard that interview years and years ago, and it just seems like every year,
every time, it's more and more relevant.
More and more relevant.
More and more relevant. Yes,
because we're
slipping to the situation.
Right, because we're slipping more and more into what he was warning about. So, like he said, by the second, by the tick, what he's saying is becoming more relevant because it's come to fruition. It's pretty much here. And when he was discussing, how you can take these people, you can show them the truth and show them facts, and they won't believe it. This goes back to what we were discussing about social media, about the way
or even mainstream media, Scotty. Social
right.
media, mainstream media, first of all, it's all censored, right? You know this. We know this. We've lived it for a very long time because I remember when YouTube was the Wild West, right? And people,
Right.
when you had friends lists and subscribers, it went to everybody. It wasn't selected. There was no algorithm. It just did. It worked, right? And then that was bad because things got out of hand. People started to learn too much too fast. Just like Yuri said, that's not what they're all about. They want to tamp that down and they're going to tamp it down any way they can. Charlotte Iserby wrote a great book, God rest her soul, The Deliberate Dumbing Down of America. Back in the, I think, late 80s, early 90s, she was
Right.
Assistant Secretary of Education under President Reagan. And she saw it herself firsthand to the point where she had to write a book about it. She's like, oh, this is terrible. This is terrible. Now, I just want to give you a statistic, right? So OECD is a UN organization of economic uh, development, blah, blah, blah. I can't remember. I'm not going to look it up. But anyway,
Right.
they do this evaluation of where countries rank when it comes to education in certain subject areas, right?
Right.
And so just consider this, right? In 1953. So 1953 comes around and the Department of Education is formed in the United States. Now at that time, the United States was by far and away number 1 in math, number 1 in reading, um, writing, comprehension, all that stuff, right? And number 1 in science. So all of it. Science, math, reading comprehension, writing, number 1. So 2015, there was one after this. It got worse. I don't, and the reason why I kind of don't like to articulate the latest statistic is because they're skewed in relation to pandemic and the shuttering of schools.
Mm.
Now,
Right.
for whatever they're worth, they do something, right? They do provide purpose for the children in somewhat limited fashion, and that does have some benefit, whether it be they learn,
I
they
mean,
have
at the
literacy, basic math, the basics or whatever, right?
and just basic social interaction with other
And right.
children
So
is very
they get
important.
that.
So right.
It's not as good as it used to be, but
Right.
they get it. And there was certainly a um, it was noticeable in the numbers what happened for that 2 years that schools, for the most part, in major metropolitan areas shuttered. So
Mhm.
so in 2015, uh, we were 26th in the world in writing and reading comprehension, 35th in the world in science, 32nd in the world in math. Since the US, the federal government took over, we have plummeted on the world stage in regards to education. And it's been documented by the control freaks. You know, you could put let's all put our stellar, super conductive tinfoil hats on for a minute. To If you think about it, uh, your trilaterals, your Bilderbergers, all of those people have talked about it. Um, Now, if you want to just be a historian, let's just be armchair historians for a second, and we'll go back into the congressional archives and we'll read a copy of the Dodd Report, which was part of the Reese Committee that looked into the endowments and how the endowments, the Ford Foundation, Guggenheim's, the Rockefellers, the DuPonts, how they were trying like crazy and were successful in infiltrating the education system and writing curriculum so that people were smart enough to run the machines but too dumb to question authority. That's what they
Right.
wanted. And that's what they got.
Yeah,
So what did they?
the schools, it became Pavlovian training, right? Oh, look,
That's right.
the bell rings. The bell rings.
Go
You
here.
react. You rush. You go here. The bell rings. You go there. It's
right.
lunchtime, which matches up with lunchtime at Dad's job.
That's
Dad
right.
has
Now,
lunch at the same time, right?
now
So
there's benefit to that. There's benefit to that in that you learn regimen, you learn routine, you learn habit,
yes.
you learn the
Uh-huh.
basics. When I say the basics, I mean you learn the basics, but you also learn those little nuggets in between, the ones that they want you to take with you as you go on your journey. And that's what Yuri was talking about. That's what we
Exactly.
see in the curriculum, and that's why there's a natural uprising of parents in the country who have now, because of this awareness, are starting to kind of push. They're pushing back because, holy crap, I can't believe it. We were.
Yeah, and if there's you know, one good thing that came out of the pandemic, it's the fact that you had parents that were sitting there watching what their student, what their child was learning in school, the the indoctrination that was taking place that they really had no idea was occurring. What they could now see it. Oh, you might have to switch your audio back to your microphone, Joe, just letting you know. But they were able to witness what their children were being indoctrinated with, and it was a shock to the system. They had no idea that this is what their child was learning in school. So you know that the pandemic shed a light on that, and now we're seeing you know uh, all these parents are like, whoa, 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 what are you teaching my kid? What's going on in the class? What, they're not learning about reading, writing, math, and arithmetic? They're now learning about, you know uh are they, are they really a boy or a girl, and are they're being exposed to all this crap. It's Yeah, so I think that it's very interesting. Very interesting. So uh-oh. Are I think Joe's having some technical difficulties here, but yeah, and this does, it goes back to what Yuri Bezmenov was saying. Uh he was speaking about it in the context of socialist and Marxist infiltration into our system, but really, it's more of a globalist new world order sort of infiltration into our system. And it just happens to be that socialism and communism you know really are lockstep in line with that agenda. And so now we look at this current generation who is offended by everything, and you can't really reason with them because they just freak out. They get triggered, right? And they can't they just want to shut people down, even if you tell them the truth. If you say, hey, there's two genders, which is truth, that is a fact, there are only two genders, you know they refuse to believe it. They will fight tooth and nail and scream and yell and demand that you be canceled and all of that, even if you present the truth in their face. It
I'm Okay, so there was
Hey, he's back.
this thing that happened and stuff, and I got into this black hole, and then it dumped me in Delta Quadrant, and I couldn't find my way back for a while, but I'm back again.
Hey, it's okay, man. It's all right. But no, I was just explaining to the audience. I meant, Yuri Bezmenov was talking about that in the context of Marxism and socialism. But we all know that that's really just in line with the broader
That's where we
globalist.
are, right? We're
Yeah,
there. We're there. The
yeah,
basics, the
and
foundation is already there, and
right,
has been
and
for
what
some
was
time,
also
like you said.
and what was also interesting, that when he was talking about is uh the United States support for these ideologies, right? When he was like the US needs to stop supporting and sending any sort of support to the Soviet Union, right? Which we all know Soviet Union collapsed and whatnot. But now we swap out the Soviet Union with China, right? Look at how much we support China. We we send our companies over there. Well, all of our technology companies go over to China. All of our uh, uh, China produces all of our goods.
But see,
And
this is the problem that you have now, right? Is the third world, the ones that have industrialized in the second world, if you will. I wouldn't even consider China that because it's kind of a conglomerate of all three. They have all three worlds lumped in. They are the classic communist um,
right,
setup, right, if you will, because you have the huge population centers and you have a lot of wealth in there, but it's really concentrated. And then you have the state workers. Now they've done just like what Stalin did back in the 1940s and 50s. Even when he first came into power, he gave dabbles of that Western capitalism, just enough to goose the economy, so
right,
that people had things they just never had before. It was like, manna from heaven, that kind of
right.
stuff.
They infuse elements of Western capitalism
But only
just
so much.
just enough to keep their economy
They're
going
trying to
and keep
find that perfect balance, because look at what they're doing here. What they're doing here is no different, only they've done it backwards to what
right,
Stalin did. So Stalin came from the reverse. He came from heavy on the communist, it's for the state, everything's for the state. And then he trickled in a little bit of that. We started with total freedom. And then over time, we started boiling frogs and started incorporating these facets of communism into our
right,
society until
right.
now you've got it totally baked in. You know, only the
Hmm.
only difference you have now though is you've got so many people hooked on it, and the system
Exactly.
is not. We are at the end. There's no more. You cannot print money at the same time you're raising interest rates. It's counterintuitive. It's like defies the laws of physics. That kind of
And
thing, right?
and and now, since we've decided to lock ourselves at the hip with China as far as economically, look at how much
We're
influence
vulnerable
China. Yeah, look at how much influence China now has on us as far as
because
our
at because
media.
at the end of the
Or the
day,
right,
think about this. At the end of the day, think about this. It's pawns on a chessboard, right? But some pawns are more strategically located or are strategically in a place that they can exact damage or even do a kill shot on uh, their opponent, just out of the position they're in, right? So it doesn't even matter that it may be a bishop to the queen, if you want to look at maybe China to the United States, but China's got us right in their sights, and it may be checkmate. Who
right,
knows? It doesn't matter. The fact is, we don't have the flexibility under the current. And there's a caveat here, but I'm going to go under the current setup and system. We've run the gambit. And the only thing they have left is the retirement funding in Wall Street. That could bail us out. You could take people's 401ks and give them treasuries. Look, people aren't buying treasuries. People aren't buying treasuries. The Federal Reserve can't monetize it, but the $30 trillion in 401ks, that can monetize it. So here's what we're going to do, right? We, the United States, and the full faith and credit of the United States will go into anybody that is 45, no, let's say 50 years of age and below. Anything you have in your 401k, you're going to get treasuries, 10-year. And we're going to give you 4% interest a year. And you're not going to lose anything. It's as stable as the United States and backed by the full faith and credit.
Oh,
And
sure.
we're going to
Yeah.
give you 4% a year. And you know what? It could get so bad that people would willingly accept that than take the staggering losses that they're seeing right now to their 401k. So now you have a scenario where, oh, well, I could take a stable 4% a year on this money, stop the bleeding, only, it's kind of a low risk thing, or so they think,
Hmm.
you know?
Right.
And then the government's bailed out. Now all of a sudden, hey, I can go and pay this stuff. Get it out, I can satisfy the debt, but only for so long. That's only a band-aid. That's the problem. As long as the system remains intact, it's a black hole. It's just going to suck everything in until finally there's nothing left. That's what they hit with this, and why inflation started coming around, because they couldn't pivot from China fast enough to other third world nations to make cheap trinkets and things and stuff that we consume. They couldn't pivot fast
Right.
enough. China had gained so much control of the market so fast, and we were so debt laden. And that's not just the government, but I'm talking about corporate America. There's just an unbelievable amount of debt. And you talk about derivatives and credit default swaps. Those are debt instruments that don't have to be on the books. They figured out a way around it, right? They said, okay, well, we're all tapped out. What do we do now? Oh, yeah, derivatives. Woo! These debt instruments are a workaround to the tune of
I
two
mean, if
and a
you think
half
about it,
to almost $3 quadrillion. Think about that.
I mean, if you think
Two.
about how terrible of a position we ended up being put in, when Nixon opened up that whole thing with China back in the day, and put us
Remember
in that
too.
position.
Remember too. Nixon was pivotal in beginning what? He's the one that started healthcare going down the road of profitability and HMOs. It was him and Kaiser Permanente that started the whole HMO structure that then led to for-profit hospitals, and that led to the pharmacy revolution, and then big pharma. Nixon was he did a lot of things that set us on that path.
Right. He really uh made a lot of moves that have put us in in the position that we are today. I mean,
But only to
it's
kick the can down the road, you have to understand, right? Because
right,
at that
right,
at that
right.
time, he had a civil. Not only was he dealing with the Vietnam War, but he had civil rights crisis going on.
Mhm.
And look at, he had two distinct enemies, and this was something that I learned when I started looking into marijuana legalization on a federal level, right? And
Right.
um, I was getting ready for an interview. I can't remember. It was a gent from the organization Normal, and so
Mm.
I was
Yeah.
looking into that, and that's where I found out about the Nixon tapes, um, and how Nixon, being who he was, and at that point in his life was pretty paranoid. He wanted to make sure he had dirt on everybody. He taped everything, right?
Right.
Obviously to a fault, and to his own demise, but it's an amazing thing to go back in the archives and listen to all this stuff. So my research was centered around um, the work of Governor of Pennsylvania, William Schaefer. Now, Schaefer was tasked by Nixon, it's called the Schaefer Commission, to do the biggest, deepest, in depth study on marijuana. Now, he had two distinct enemies, Richard Nixon: African Americans and hippies. They were his bane. And he did whatever he could do to hit him where it hurts. With African Americans, it was pumping heroin into the ghettos, into the neighborhoods. And what happens? You get them all drug addicted. They're all dealing drugs. You explode the prison population, and you target them, which is exactly what happened. I mean, he said it on the tapes. So people that say that, there's a historical basis for that. You can't discount it. But
Right.
that's what makes this all the more important, is to understand why and fix it. Right? You have to attack root cause. So here's root cause. So the drug war was specifically targeted at those two populations, the hippies and the blacks, because those were his biggest opponents. Those were the ones that were hammering on the Vietnam War, and those were the ones that were hammering on the civil rights, and he did not like it, not one bit. So full full disclosure, the war on drugs was actually at its core a race war. He was trying to target uh your African Americans, but also a culture war. It was a culture war in that here are people that do not agree with him and that are more independent, more free, kind of branching off. And by the way, they're very vocal. Uh, so we're going to do away with them too. So, Schaefer, I want you to do this report. Now, he didn't realize that Governor Schaefer was going to actually do a thorough report and a pretty damn bang up job, because
Right.
it was because there was no evidence that it impaired driving, impaired your ability to do work. If anything, uh, people were more mellow. Uh, it encouraged a little more eating. However, on the whole, there was really no harm in it.
Right.
It did go into, like if you do too much, you might feel a little paranoia, blah, blah, blah. But on the whole, relative to alcohol, it's a slam dunk. Well,
Exactly. Right.
Nixon didn't like that at all. And the name of the study was called marijuana, or what was it? It was marijuana, something of understanding. I'm going to find it because I want people to be. You can find it on archive.org. And it's a fascinating read because this was the first ever certified in-depth study by the government, and it totally went sideways on him. So what did Nixon do? Nixon goes and he puts it in the National Archives and buries it because he doesn't want
Right.
that. He doesn't. So that's when you have like, this is drugs. This is your brain on drugs. Any questions? And it's a fried egg, right? And
Right.
they're talking about weed, and then and of course you have reefer madness and all that stuff. All of that was a
The DARE program, remember,
but
in
it's
school.
all targeted. So there's that, and then of course you have synthetic fabrics that are synthetic material like DuPont's nylon. Hemp was so much better and cheaper and easier to produce and much better for the environment, the whole nine, than nylon. But there's no money in that, really, if you think about it, for the DuPonts, and they were a pretty powerful family, so why not? So they were pivotal in the whole um, villainization of marijuana. It's a
Right.
plant, right? That's all it
Mhm.
is, just like anything else, and you see this through history and how it's happened, and prohibition and control, and then cradle to grave care, and um, all the gimmies and the things in the name of equality and in the name of diversity and all. It's all gonna come crashing down, just like Yuri said, and you can see it happening around you as I speak. I mean, things have gotten so crazy that it's undeniable the effects of this sustained campaign over generations. Really. So it shouldn't be a surprise to anybody that we're here, but it's pivotal to know how we got here so
Right.
that you can kind of see where things might be leading. Now, that doesn't tell you you're going to know the future, but you'll certainly be better off knowing or having a better idea of where things might lead or how to focus your efforts if you understand the past. And one thing you'll
Exactly.
understand is that it's going to get rough. And this is just the tip of the iceberg. This is the start of it. Everything's kind of tepid right now because the elections are on Tuesday. But after Tuesday, things might get a little hot because that's when, oh boy, that's when things start to really happen because you're going to have winners, you're going to have losers. Some of them soar, right? And there's going to
Right.
be things that a lame duck Congress, a lot of things that can happen with a lame duck Congress. Um, in those 3 to 4 months before the new Congress takes hold. And even then, what's that Congress going to do if the um, majority isn't enough to override a veto of a senile president? And
Hmm.
take it a step further than that, because there's been parties in power before. And what did they do? They ran us into the ground, into the dirt, and we battle back. And then we run down into the dirt again. So I mean, you can buy into the two-party system. You can buy into voting, and that's all well and good. I tend to focus on the local, you know, the ground up type of stuff.
Right.
I think you have a much more of an influence on a local scale or on a state scale, but on the federal scale, things have gotten so massive and so big and so corrupt that, um, and quite frankly, doing things in your name that you would never agree to, things in your children's name and generations down the road, assuming we can make it that far. They're doing that. They just have no. Uh, there's no conscience about what they're doing and saddling these future generations with. I say that thinking that um, that we even have that in future generations, but chances are the whole system's going to change anyway. You know.
Yeah, something has got to give. And you know, it, things are definitely going to change. Now the question is, what does that look like? How does that unfold?
You never
Hmm.
know, dude,
I
but
don't.
all I
You
can
don't
tell you
know,
is
man.
it's never what you think it is, so don't even
Hmm.
try. Don't try, because what you're gonna do is just prepare for something and be like, "Ah, crap," Just don't set yourself up for disappointment, that's all I can say. That's all I can say, but I cannot stress enough, things like, Yuri's interview, and, please check out the full interview. You just gotta find it on YouTube if you can find it, or, other avenues, and also check out all of the other G. Edward Griffin interviews that he did. He did one with Norman Dodd that'll blow your socks off. Honest to God,
Right.
right
And
before Norman Dodd passes away, he spills his guts about the endowments and the things that he saw and his assistants saw, that if you listen to it and you see what happened today and where we are, it, it's sickening. It really is,
yeah.
Scotty.
And on the topic of the Fed, G. Edward Griffin also wrote a fantastic book called The Creature from Jekyll Island. So people
That's
should
right.
check that out too. And with
Oh,
that,
we're out of time.
We're out of time.
It's 2
So-
hours come and gone. So we'll see you next week, folks. Thank you for watching the Freedom Link. KGRADB.com. Have a great week. We'll see you next weekend.